Nole Insiders Lane Hurt and Tim Linnefelt here with you. Regular season done with thanks to a 31-13 shellacking against the Florida Gators. Seniors go 8-0 against the Gators and the Hurricanes, first time that's ever happened. A lot of great stuff from that game. Offensively, offensive line, fantastic. No sacks, only allowed 3 or 4 pressures according to Pro Football Focus. They were great. Defense obviously dominating, had 8 of the top 10 grades against the Gators. What kind of stuck out to you when you kind of looked at the numbers and what Pro Football Focus was saying about that game?
Well, I think you mentioned the offensive line, and that was something that going into the game we said was going to be a key, is how will Florida State's offensive line hold up against Florida's defensive front, which, as we know, is one of the best in the country. Turns out really good. They you said kept DeAndre Francois clean. The hits that he did take, and there were some big ones, came down the field when he was running and scrambling, but you couldn't fault the offensive line for that. Dalvin Cook was able to run just about anywhere he wanted to. He probably could have had even more yardage and more touchdowns if not for a few little things that didn't break his way, but he was a force all night. You made, on offense, you made one of the best defenses in the country, and anybody would say that. Look pretty ordinary, and to me that's a huge sign. And look, Florida, I think, has some issues. I think the defense has some issues, and that it's hard to play at such a high level knowing that your offense isn't going to score, knowing that you're going to be out there again in 3 plays. And I'm not saying that to knock Florida, but I mean, it's hard. The grind of a season, knowing that your margin for error as a defense is so incredibly slim. I do think that by the end of the game, or the second half, you saw that a little bit, and the intensity from Florida's defense wasn't there because, hey, we're down 2 touchdowns and our offense hasn't scored more than 24 points in a month and a half. So I get that, but look, Florida State had to build that lead to begin with, and DeAndre Francois was fantastic. Dalvin Cook, offensive line. I mean, like, you score 31 points against a team that ranks in the top 5 in just about any defensive category. You're going to feel pretty good about that.
Big picture, Dalvin Cook, run out of ways to say how good he was this season. Mm-hmm. Fantastic year, broke all sorts of FSU records, but I think the key is going to be going forward, DeAndre Francois, ACC Freshman of the Year. Is there enough there for fans to be excited about the future of the Florida State quarterback position?
Oh, are you kidding? Of course. No, DeAndre was fantastic.
Really?
Like you said, the ACC Freshman of the Year, Rookie of the Year, whatever it is they call it. And I think he kind of had one of the quietest, really good seasons by a quarterback that I can remember in Florida State history, recent Florida State history. Dalvin Cook got so much of the attention, and even to a degree, some of those receivers we got so excited about, Auden Tate and Iquan Murray, and that's well-deserved. They played really well, especially down the stretch. But DeAndre had a really, really nice regular season, and so
moved well in the pocket.
Yeah.
Really showed anticipation, like on that touchdown throw to Travis Rudolph.
Yeah.
Some really nice moments there from
kind of found the window. Travis was open, but it wasn't an easy throw on that touchdown, and so he was almost sort of, I don't want to say overshadowed, but it kind of felt like, it was every week out he was throwing for about 325 yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns and maybe 1 or 2 turnovers, and he gave you more than enough to win with. And I think next year, depending on what Florida State has back, obviously we're all wondering about Dalvin Cook's status, but there's some other guys, Roderick Johnson in particular, who is at least eligible to leave. Depending on the pieces you have back, I think the offense could be much more centered around the passing game in DeAndre Francois next year. And it's easy to forget. It feels like he's been here a long time, but he's only a redshirt freshman. And so, if we're going to assume that a redshirt freshman is going to improve over spring practice, fall practice, and on into next year, even in these next few bowl practices, you got to think that the ceiling for a guy like that is pretty high.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big fan of DeAndre Francois. I see a lot of great things in him moving forward. Now let's look at the defense a little bit. What do we make of this unit? They really struggled early in the season against some really great offenses, then really got it together and shut down some teams, but those were also some poor offenses. But you look at this. Here's the stat I looked up yesterday. The Noles had 17 sacks in the last 3 games. There are 17 teams who didn't have that many sacks all season long. Mm-hmm. I happen to think the defense improved a lot over the course of the season. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I do. Look, it can be both, right? The defense can have improved while also allowing for the fact that the offenses they played down the stretch weren't as good as the offenses that they played at the start of the season. I think that speaks more to the quality of the offenses that Florida State played in the first month. When you play a fully healthy Ole Miss, you play Louisville and Lamar Jackson before everybody really knew what they were capable of when everything was clicking. You play North Carolina, who at that point was healthy and fast and just fantastic in terms of exactly. USF, their quarterback Quentin Flowers, I think, ranks in the top 10 of the ESPN quarterback metric. I mean, those offenses are really, really good. So I think we said this a couple weeks ago out here. I wonder, just from a perception standpoint, had it been a little more, the schedule been a little more mixed in terms of who you played. Had you played Wake Forest early and maybe Louisville late, or whatever the case may be, would the perception have been a little bit different? Because the numbers that looked so bad early on for Florida State's defense maybe wouldn't have looked as bad taken in a bigger picture of averages. Does that make sense?
It does.
And that said, I mean, I do think they got better. Look, Josh Sweat, the play he made against Florida the other night, I mean, he looked like he jumped off a trampoline and made that sack. And so that's a play that, because of his health, he couldn't have made earlier in this season when he's still trying to figure out that knee. I think he's feeling better now.
I think so. Brian Burns, 9.5 sacks. I mean, an incredible year from a freshman who really got into things midway through the year. Yeah,
and exactly. You can expect that from a top-end freshman late in the season. It's hard to expect it in week 2 or 3. So no, I don't think there's any doubt that those guys. I mean, look at Tavares McFadden. The way that he improved. For the first month or so, the line on him was that he'll grab interceptions and he'll also give up 80-yard touchdowns, and that was well deserved. And he would tell you that. Well, somewhere when we were all sort of not looking, the 80-yard touchdowns disappeared, but the interceptions kept happening. You can't say that that's not a sign of improvement. So I think they did a really nice job, and credit look to the coaching staff, Charles Kelly, Jimbo Fisher, for not losing those guys and for rallying them together and saying, hey, you guys are talented, you can play, and you can be a great defense, rather than letting them sort of out to shore, so to speak. I don't even know if that makes any sense, but letting them, they didn't let them wallow when they were struggling and stayed on them, and they ended up getting to have a pretty nice unit.
Now the bowl picture. College football playoff came out on Tuesday night. Florida State 11th, Louisville 12th. That would mean Florida State would go to the Orange Bowl, assuming Clemson beats Virginia Tech. Now, I'm the optimist in this group. Tim will be the first one to admit that. In our office, I'm always the optimist. Yeah, I still see a scenario where Florida gets destroyed by Alabama and the committee flips and puts Louisville ahead of Florida State. Tell me I'm crazy, Tim.
Well, I don't think you're crazy. I don't know. Look, what you're really getting at, I think, is that when it comes to the College Football Playoff Committee, and now we're in year 3, nobody really knows what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And we learned, if anything, from that 2014 season when we were sort of watching them like hawks with what they were doing in Florida State each and every week. There's no way to predict. There's no real rhyme or reason, and that last poll, the one that actually determines matchups, can sometimes look a lot different than the ones that preceded it. So, in my opinion, I think the committee just sort of has that in their back pocket. And I don't think that Alabama beating Florida badly should flip Louisville and Florida State.
Nor should it. I agree 100%.
But I do agree with you that if they wanted to, let's say if somebody on the committee on Friday said, I had a change of heart. We can't get past that loss that Florida State had at Louisville. We need to switch them. That would be a reason that you could say this is why we switched. Again, assuming Alabama were to beat Florida really badly. If it's a close game, I don't know how you do it.
Then we're looking at potentially a Citrus Bowl berth, Florida State versus LSU, which would be a phenomenal matchup for so many different reasons.
It'll be fun.
But Florida State, Michigan also looks really nice.
Yeah.
Virginia Tech could start spoiling it all by winning that, and then all of a sudden, I mean, what are we looking at in that case?
Well, I think it's kind of back where we started, 3-4 weeks ago, in that you're looking at a combination of either the Citrus Bowl, the Russell Athletic Bowl, or the Tax Slayer Bowl, the Gator Bowl in Jacksonville. And in any of those cases, you're probably playing. I think in the Russell Athletic, you get a Big 12 team, potentially maybe Oklahoma State, Oklahoma, somebody like that. And then the Citrus, you're talking about maybe an LSU up until last week, maybe Tennessee, somebody like that. But who knows? Everything's kind of screwy right now. I like to focus on the idea of playing Michigan in the Orange Bowl. I think that would just be a blast. Getting in there with some press conferences with Jim Harbaugh. It would be the 25th anniversary of Florida State's win up at Michigan in 1991. Ooh. So they haven't played since then.
Yeah, well, fans, if that's what really gets you going, if that's what gets you get your orange and your purple on, I'm sure there's a discount store somewhere you can find something cheap, $5 for something like that. Anyways, if LSU, Florida State's your jam, maybe you want to see Louisville flip and go ahead of Florida State. But a lot of interesting things. We'll have to enjoy the conference championship games this weekend, and we'll talk more on Monday when we know where Florida State's going to go.
We'll know soon.
There we go. So for Tim, I'm Lane. Go Noles.